what really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Tuesday, January 30th, 2018. Almost to the end of the month here. And, of course, for those of you who are going to be trying to see that lunar eclipse, it's actually tonight after midnight for most people. In other words, before sunrise tomorrow. And I was noticing a lot of the articles talking about it. Didn't make it clear. They kept saying January 31st, and a lot of people could be forgiven for thinking it was January 31st in the evening. No, it's in the morning. I want to look at it here, but it looks like we're going to be under thunder showers by then, so we'll see what happens. Anyway, getting on to more serious things. We've got a lot of stuff to talk about today. Today is the State of the Union speech. It's shaping up to be this amazing political theater piece for both the Republicans and the Democrats. Our phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, ready to answer the phone when you call on in. A quick reminder that Thursday, Greg Felton, who's an author, will be joining us in our third hour to talk about his new book. And, of course, on Friday, the lovely Lady Claire returns to the airwaves. And I know you're all looking forward to it. I've just been inundated with emails, sending well wishes, suggestions for how to get her back all better. And she's doing really much better. These last 4 days, it's just every day we can see the improvement. And as of this morning, she's actually off the pain meds. So it's looking really, really good. So she'll be here on Friday with her unique perspective on the world. Anyway, tonight is the State of the Union speech. It's going to be this amazing political theater. Trump is going to be talking about the economy, going to be talking about immigration, and apparently the Democrats are trying to load up the audience with all of these wonderful examples of illegal immigrants, which raises the question, how are they going to make sure they're not arrested on their way out of the building? Because they're not supposed to be there. And, of course, Donald Trump is bringing in family members of Americans who've been murdered by illegal immigrants. So that's going to be a little bit of a kerfuffle. And we may even see the release of the FISA memo at the conclusion of the State of the Union speech. That's the rumor that's floating around inside the Beltway right now, is that it will be allowed out right after the speech, and steal the thunder out of the Democrats' follow-up in response to the State of the Union here. And apparently, there's a billionaire Democratic donor, Tom Steyer, and he is funding a new advertisement calling for Donald Trump's impeachment, which is actually going to be run during the State of the Union address. And apparently, this hedge fund manager has plowed $40 million into his campaign against Donald Trump that includes national advertisements, a petition, billboards in Times Square. Now, it's his money, and he can run all the commercials that he wants to, but I think it's definitely questionable taste for these TV networks to run a commercial calling for the impeachment of the president during the president's speech. I think if I'd been vice president of advertising at those networks, I would have said, let's find someplace else for it. But then I guess that explains why I'm not a vice president of advertising at a TV news network, because I actually have ethics and morality and a sense of proportion. Apparently last night, a whole bunch of celebrities got together and had the People's State of the Union, and apparently they held this event at Manhattan's Town Hall Theater, and they live streamed it online. I hadn't even heard about it until after it was all over, but they had Mark Ruffalo, Alyssa Milano, John Leguizamo, Cynthia Nixon, Amy Schumer, Kathy Najimy, Patricia Arquette, Rosie Perez, and Gina Gershon. Whoopi Goldberg was there. Tom Steyer, the same guy who's running the ads to impeach Donald Trump. Musicians Common and Andra Day, Michael Moore, Fisher Stevens, and they basically just ranted and raved and whined and drooled all night long about how it should have been Hillary Clinton in that Oval Office. Well, democracy in action. Trump won the election by the rules everybody agreed to play by before it all gets started. And I'm getting really sick and tired of the Democrats saying, well, Hillary won the popular vote. We should go with the popular vote. No, Hillary went into that campaign wanting to win the Electoral College. In fact, she was playing dirty with the Electoral College, trying to capture as many of those superdelegates. So she was playing by the same rules Donald Trump was. That's what everybody agreed to do. You don't get to change the rules after it's all over, because if you had gone into this election as a popular vote, both candidates would have altered their campaign strategies. And in any event, you got to subtract out a few million illegal immigrant voters before you start claiming that Hillary Clinton won the popular vote. And one of the things that's so infuriating about Democrats is long after their claims have been discredited, they're still out there screaming them over and over and over again. Like if they just say them often enough and loud enough, we'll all suffer Democrat fatigue and say, okay, Hillary won the popular vote. Go shut up already. Well, it doesn't work that way. It really doesn't work that way. All right, we're going to do a shout out now to our honor affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Obviously, the big news, of course, is yesterday the House Intelligence Committee voted through the release of the FISA memo. It's now in the hands of Donald Trump, who, again, I said the rumor that's circulating around the Beltway, he's going to waive the 5-day review period, and it's going to be released right after the State of the Union speech. And so we're all waiting to see what's in there. But there's a very telling indicator, and that is because FBI Director Christopher Wray is being reported as having been totally blown away by what's in this memo. This is coming down from official sources. He's got no reason to doubt it, although the Democrats are saying it's all lies, it's all lies, it's all lies to discredit these fine institutions of the Department of Justice and the FBI. And apparently Devin Nunes gave the Democrats on the House Intelligence Committee an opportunity to point out anything in the memo that's factually incorrect, and of course they couldn't. And so the Democrats are trying to take the position of, well, yes, everything in the memo is true. It all happened. But you wrote it in a way to just discredit the Department of Justice and the FBI. No, it's the actions of the people in the Department of Justice and the FBI that have brought this loss of credibility down on them. The House Intelligence Committee is just reporting what we all pretty much have surmised from outside. Now, again, getting back to Christopher Wray being so shocked by this, it's becoming obvious that in both the case of the FBI and the Department of Justice, and probably the government as a whole, they're dealing with bureaucrat occlusion. In other words, they're caught up in this belief about how good they're supposed to be. They can't deal with how bad they've become. But to give you an indicator of just how serious this is, remember, earlier in the year it was reported that FBI Director Christopher Wray literally threatened to resign if Andrew McCabe was fired. And he went from that to basically firing McCabe himself in 24 hours. Now, McCabe they're going to let him stay till March so he gets his full pension. But he was literally escorted out the door of FBI headquarters, which is very humiliating. But the idea is he doesn't get a chance to go back to his office and erase the hard drive. So something is really going on. McCabe quite possibly will be looking at criminal charges before this is over. And of course, prosecutors are going to be getting him to roll over on some of the other people at the FBI. And that's got to be keeping former Director James Comey awake at night, along with two former Attorneys General, Loretta Lynch and Eric Holder. And then, of course, there's the Clintons and Barack Obama. All right, we're going to take a phone call now from Dustin in New Jersey. Dustin, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
James Comey ain't the only bad cop in the country, Mike. I mean, look, this is not about Obama. I know some people say, oh, I hear Fox News, Obama's this or that. This goes back a long time. This is the rot of our country. And, Mike, I still don't think it's going to be cleaned out completely. I mean, you got these elements in there that are going to be cleaned out, but let me tell you, you got basically spider webs of going in different directions connected to other spider webs. I mean, you got a web of corruption that goes back 100 years. It's not going to be solved overnight. You know,
no, it isn't. It isn't. And again, obviously, I'd like to see some of these individuals go to prison, especially the Clintons who destroyed Claire and my life all those years ago. But what I'm thinking could likely happen when the true scale of this scandal comes on out there will be no more support for this government by the American people, and like the former Soviet Union, it's going to collapse. And at that point, we, the American people, start planning for a new country, ideally based on the original Constitution and the first 13 amendments, and we basically say, the debt is written off. All of these trillions and trillions of dollars of debt, we could never pay it off anyway. It shouldn't have happened. The Federal Reserve was an unconstitutional move by the Congress, so the debt is written off. Jubilee, and we zero out the slates and we start the country all over again.
No, Mike, debt jubilee for the regular people, not debt jubilee for the Wall Street bankers, you know, and the oligarchy. There's no debt jubilee for them. There should be hanging from a tree post for them, because that's what these people have done to us. I mean, they have outsourced your jobs, you know, bailed out the bankers in Wall Street, and left you with the bill. You know, they're not your friends. They'll never be your friends. They'll never be your party. There's no parties, Republican, Democrat. What a joke. It's an oligarchy. We talked about this before. We'll talk about it again. It's an oligarchy of corruption. The Bushes, the Clintons, people in the Reagan administration, goes back to the Nixon administration with Vietnam. Before that, I mean, it's nonstop. You know what, Mike, what I'm really worried about? Maybe they're going to try to do something if too much comes out, because, you know, you got this stuff with Turkey going on now.
Oh, yeah, there'll be a distraction. I mean, I'm expecting a distraction of some kind. I'm expecting there to be something, could even happen at the State of the Union speech. And of course, we got the Super Bowl coming on up. But yeah, I mean, the FBI as an institution is feeling the threat. The Department of Justice as a complete institution is feeling a threat. I imagine the entire federal government is very worried. This could trigger a complete collapse of that central federal government. And looking at the absolute lack of any morality or ethics, institutionally, yeah, they're desperate enough to try just about anything. And we know the FBI has always been corrupt like this. Go back and reread the history of COINTELPRO. They are not the good people depicted on films and TV shows. In fact, when J. Edgar Hoover was head of the FBI, he made a point of basically going out to Hollywood and literally supervising any TV shows or movies about the FBI to make sure the public got this image of really good people, you know, and they're only concerned with law enforcement. And Hoover himself was a crook. He was a blackmailer. Originally, when they got Dillinger, he tried to take personal credit for it. From the guy who actually shot Dillinger. I'm blanking on the agent's name, but there was a big stink about that.
What about
Melvin
the CIA,
Purvis.
though, Mike?
Oh, yeah, same thing.
CIA,
assassinations, coup d'etats.
John Brennan. And before that, you know, he's a poster child for what's in the CIA before him. What was it, the CIA, the ISI or the OSI before the CIA? You know,
OSS. They were created out of the OSS at the end of World War II. And even Harry Truman, when he allowed this to happen, he said, this is a risk, this is dangerous. I think something that is very indicating of the real culture at CIA is the strange death of William Casey, who had already left the CIA. He was retired, and then he was basically grabbed out of that canoe, vanished for 3 or 4 days. Then he shows up in the canoe with obvious signs of having been tortured. So there was something going on there. I mean, I would love to think that the CIA are the people described in Tom Clancy's books, and I like all of Tom Clancy's books before he started using ghostwriters, but they're not. They run drugs, they overthrow governments. They're basically organized crime wrapped in an American flag.
Yeah, some of them are, Mike, but they're controlled by the controllers that are in control, like John Brennan types. But like, where's the patriots? Like, where's the people? We're always saying the people are going to fall on their swords for the empire. Where's the people fall on their swords for the republic? You know, I got the hand up. You're another one.
I mean, we're outside the government. The government doesn't want us around. We get in the way of the deal making and the profit making and the running the drugs and, the dirty dealing. They don't want any good people in government. I mean, I've been waiting for a quarter of a century to see somebody in this government stand up and do the right thing. It hasn't happened. The people capable of standing up and doing the right thing, they're not in the government. They're out someplace else where they're teaching in the schools or they're doing medicine at the clinics or they're manufacturing something. The good people are not allowed in the government. Government is an organized crime ring. It's a crime spree, and it's certainly been that way ever since the assassination of John F. Kennedy.
Well, if they represent the weak. They're weak, Mike. They're weak-minded people that don't care about this country, I mean, I want to switch gears and talk about the stock market today.
Okay, before you do that, yes, there are some people in government, especially Congress, who seem to be mentally missing a few gears, but a lot of these people are very smart. And one of the things I learned when I was a member of Mensa was that the criminal mind generally does tend to be much more intelligent. So let's not underestimate them. But you're absolutely right. They don't care about America. They don't care about the American people. They went into politics to make themselves rich and powerful and just be able to have a lot of fun things to do.
Yeah, Mike, I'm going to talk about the Dow and the economy, how people don't realize this is like gambling at a casino, putting your money on like a roulette wheel. That's why it's down today. It's not. There is no savings rate. This is it. You put your money into this and it drops. Like what kind of like investment is that? You know what I mean? Like what? There is none. It's a fraud, man. It's jacked up on fake money printing and buying your own stocks back. And then you get this today. And the unemployment rate's low and the stock market's every day. It's up at record breaking highs. Oh, it's a fraud, man. You're being lied to, people. It's a fraud. The unemployment rate's higher than you think if you look at the real numbers, and people really realize what's going on. I mean, Jesus.
Oh, we're being lied to left and right. Certainly on the unemployment numbers, the real unemployment, we've got about 100 million legal American citizens willing and able to work who have not been able to find jobs for months, if not years. And we have the Democrats just flooding in all these illegal immigrants and refugees to put a further stress on our job market. Now, getting on back to the stock market, you need to understand that how the market runs today is not how it was originally designed to operate. When the stock market was started, it literally was a way for ordinary people to invest in the livestock of the farming industry. That's where the name comes from. And the idea was at the beginning of the year, you would invest your money with the farmers who would go on out and they would buy calves and chickens and so forth. They'd spend the year growing them. Then they would harvest off and sell them and share the profits back with those who had given them money at the year. That's what it meant to invest. And there would be a long interval of time between when you would invest and when you would get a return. As the stock market started getting into other areas of investment, manufacturing and so forth, people were able to trade a lot faster, and that's where the speculative behavior came on in, where people wanted to buy and sell the stocks to make money off the price of the stock rather than the underlying business enterprise. And the speculators, they love a volatile market because they're trying to ride those straddles to make a lot of money very fast. There was actually several years ago an attempt to basically pass a law saying that when you bought stock at any of the stock exchanges, you were obligated to hang on to it for a set number of days, something like 3 or 4. And of course, Wall Street lobbied against that because that would cut into their brokerage fees. And so now you have this era of high-speed computer trading, which is executing all of these amazingly fast stocks, buying and selling. And the underlying business enterprise is just, it's not changing. And so the stock prices become completely disconnected from the underlying business enterprise. Justin, do you have any more? Because we got to take a break for commercials.
No, that's it, Mike. Have a good show.
All right, thanks a lot. We'll be back with another phone call after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And once again, if you'd like to support Republic Broadcasting, the postal address where you can send a check or money order is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas 78664. The phone number, if you want to call on in and become a recurring subscriber, is 800-724-2719, extension 03. And right now, we need your support probably more than ever before, because we're heading into this major fight where we're trying to get the truth out about what was going on with the FBI and the Department of Justice, and all the Democrats and all the liberals, they're trying to fight back. They're trying to find some way that they can shut us down. Again, as it said on that spot, our advertisers are being threatened, and our servers are under constant attack, although my new server is definitely much better at fending that stuff off. But again, it's an ongoing battle, and we do need your help. Okay, we're going to take another phone call here. Chance in West Virginia. That's an interesting name. Aloha, Chance. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. I just wanted to correct you. That CIA director who drowned, that was William Colby.
Oh, you're right. Yes, I stand corrected.
Yeah, and the funny thing about William Colby is he was close friends with Senator John D. Camp of Nebraska, who uncovered the pedophile ring in Lincoln, Nebraska, the book, The Franklin Cover-Up.
The Franklin Scandal, yes, yes.
Yes, he was close friends with John D. Camp, who I believe just died, too, recently. So, you know, it all links together, these mysterious deaths. That's the point I was trying to make.
Well, you know, at that level of government, everybody knows everybody. Washington, D.C. is actually a very small town, and the people actually in the government is a smaller population, and they're all power players, and they go to all the top parties, and they do know each other, and they build that network. And we were going to talk about this later in the show, but this is a good time to mention it. Julian Assange has tweeted on out a chart of how all the corporate media is interlinked with the Bilderbergers, the Trilateral Commission, and the Council on Foreign Relations. And everybody knows everybody. And that's, so yeah, if you're in that business long enough, sooner or later you get tainted, you get connected, you get corrupted. And I think that's what happened. And there's always been a certain degree of corruption inside government. But it really started getting out of hand in the 1980s when the CIA was running, guns and drugs to Nicaragua. The Clintons were helping them out. That was the start of the Clintons' rise to the highest levels of government, and why they are so untouchable right now. And I'm sure everybody in Washington, D.C., as the prosecutions start, they're all worried. Who's going to turn first? Who's going to be the first one to make a deal for the prosecution, go into the witness protection program, and blow the whistle on all of them? Anything else to add to that, Chance?
No, that's about it, Mike. And I hope Claire is feeling much better. And be well, and God bless.
Well, thank you very much. And yes, Claire is doing a lot better. You know, she still has to take it easy, but just these last 4 days. And I took her to the chiropractor yesterday, and it was basically in and out. So, yeah, and I'm just delighted this is not going to become a chronic problem. Okay, getting on back to the news here. The House Intelligence Committee, because of what's in that FISA memo, has now officially opened investigations into the conduct of the FBI and the Department of Justice both during and after the 2016 election. And apparently they uncovered just this huge group of people who took it upon themselves to say, we can't let the American people pick Donald Trump as the president. We have to bring him down. This is apparently a sizable portion of the FBI's leadership who are out there plotting the overthrow of the president, as well as covering up the crimes of Hillary Clinton. So, of course, the Democrats are out there saying, no, it was a mistake to release the FISA memo. You're just trying to make the FBI and Department of Justice look bad, even though they concede there is nothing factually incorrect in the memo. And they're still out there screaming that nobody wants to see the FISA memo. All this Twitter chatter, it's all by Russian bots. It's those evil Russians. The Russians are doing it. Now, Twitter has already confirmed those are real-life people who are pushing the release the memo hashtag. We all want to see the memo here. We're not Russian bots. I'm not a Russian bot. Over at MSNBC on their Morning Joe show, co-host John Heilemann is suggesting that House Intelligence Committee Chairman Devin Nunes is a Russian agent. Ooh, the Russians again. This is all an evil Russian plot to bring down the United States. You know something? I don't think these people realize just how silly they look. We'll be back after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Getting on back to the news. Basically, Fox News analyst Sebastian Gorka may have gone a little overboard. He's describing the Nunes memo is 100 times bigger than what caused the American Revolution. So there's a little bit of hype, but apparently a lot of people are saying this is going to be a big deal. Of course, Gorka may be trying to get our expectations so high that when we finally see the memo, it's kind of like, oh, is that what all the fuss is about? But so far, based on what has come on out, what we're looking at is insurrection and rebellion within the Department of Justice and the FBI. We're looking certainly at obstruction of justice charges for a lot of people in their handling of the Hillary Clinton email scandal. And most important, we need to say what motivated all of these people to commit these crimes. And that, of course, is that web of drug money corruption, because it's a common theme that runs through all of their careers. We certainly know that the Clintons were involved in the CIA's cocaine running back in the 1980s. We know that before she was Attorney General, Loretta Lynch was the U.S. Attorney for New York. And when HSBC was caught laundering drug money, Loretta Lynch basically slapped their wrist and let them go on their way. And when HSBC was actually laundering all this drug money, James Comey was on the board of directors. Do you get the link and the connection? It's a drug cartel. That's what's going on in Washington, D.C. Along with the usual espionage and all that other stuff. Story out of Investment Watchdog basically says it all. We are witnessing the greatest scandal in U.S. history, framing a duly elected president for treason. And that's really what it comes on down to. And it was being done by institutions of the government itself. FBI, Department of Justice, and who knows where else it leads. Who knows where else it leads. And again, I'm going to put out this question. Why everybody is so afraid of Hillary Clinton. It's not just the drug connection here. Why would the head of the Department of Justice and the head of the FBI try to bury the email scandal? If it was just an email server, then yeah, Title 18 violation. Hillary is banned from holding public office. Well, actually, apparently a lot of the states have changed their laws. You can be a politician if you're a convicted felon. And somebody sent me an email last night pointing out how many members of Congress are actually convicted felons. These are people sitting in Congress, some of them from states where they, in theory, couldn't run for a state office because of their criminal record. But getting on back to Hillary Clinton. Remember back when Bill Clinton was running for re-election. I'm going to keep hitting this point over and over and over again until somebody in Washington, D.C. pays attention. When Bill Clinton was running for re-election, he used his authority as president to authorize the sale to China of militarily sensitive technology over the protestations of the Defense Department and the intelligence agencies. And while he was doing this, Chinese money was being funneled through Chinese American citizens into Bill Clinton's re-election campaign coffers. We're talking huge amounts of money. And they went through these Chinese American citizens, like Charlie Tree, to make it look like it was legitimate, because you're not supposed to take campaign donations from foreign governments. But that's where it all came from. And there was briefly an investigation. It was called Chinagate. And they confirmed the money was coming from Chinese businessmen, in one case from Chinese intelligence agencies, and it should have been a huge scandal. But again, the Clintons are untouchable because they know where all the dead bodies are and how they got to be dead bodies. So it is a legitimate question to ask if Hillary Clinton, while Secretary of State, the reason she set up this private email server, and remember, it was all her idea. She broke the rules and set up a private email server for a government business with weaker security than Ashley Madison. It is a reasonable question to ask if she was repeating the Chinagate operation. If she was using that weak email server to sell U.S. government secrets to interested foreign parties, and using that bogus Clinton Foundation to collect and launder the money, because about 40% of the money that poured into that foundation came from foreign sources. And there's no prohibition for foreign donations to a charitable foundation that actually didn't do all that much charity. It's a slush fund. They set it up to get around the prohibition against foreign donations. Now, Paul Craig Roberts is out there warning the stakes in Russiagate are extreme. This whole thing is a conspiracy organized for the purpose of bringing down the elected President of the United States. And Americans are just now waking up to what's going on. This is a coup organized by top officials of the Obama Justice Department, FBI, CIA, the Hillary, the DNC, and the prostitute and correspondent media to overturn the result of a Democratic election. That's what's going on here. And the corporate media is still out there saying, well, Mueller still needs to finish his investigation into Trump-Russia collusion. He has been at it a year. He has spent something like $10 million, and he's come up with nothing except some indictments for procedural crimes completely unrelated to the campaign. And now he's desperate to turn the firing of former FBI Director James Comey into an obstruction of justice charge. They're grasping at straws over there. But Paul Craig Roberts is right. We are witnessing an attempted coup. Now, I'll be the first to admit I'm very disappointed in Donald Trump. We have heard nothing from his Vaccine Safety Commission. He shut down his Election Integrity Commission. And he's working on immigration, but he's not accomplishing much. Now, of course, he is dealing with a lot of obstructionism. He is dealing with a staff and a Congress who are not on his side. He's dealing with a Republican Party that absolutely does not like him because he is proof they have lost control of their own party machinery. But he won the election by the rules that everybody agreed to play by before the election. He is the president. And everybody who's part of this coup needs to be locked up. There are laws that make all this stuff illegal. And maybe that's what shocked FBI Director Christopher Wray about the FISA memo. Maybe the FISA memo says, yes, this group inside the FBI was trying to basically overthrow the presidency. So anyway, the Democrats are out there trying to do damage control. Nancy Pelosi was out there doing an interview, ranting about Dennis News. She's turned on Chris Cuomo, and she's out there saying they've made up a memo that isn't even true, and they're lying to the American people. Except that the Democrats who've actually read the memo on the House Intelligence Committee are saying there is nothing factually incorrect in it. That's not going to stop Nancy Pelosi from going on out there and just trying to win by shouting at everybody. She's accusing Nunes of acting like a stooge of the White House at the acquiescence of, or maybe even the guidance of the Speaker of the House. See, now it's all an evil plot, an evil Russian plot. They're going to go back to that well. They're going to keep on blowing. This is a Russian plot. And apparently Adam Schiff, when he came on out following the vote to release the memo, apparently he suffered a major political defeat because he claims he's got a memo that is just as factual and basically supports the Democrats' version of a Russian conspiracy. And the House Intelligence Committee, not being allowed to read Schiff's memo, of course, did not vote to let Schiff release it. And apparently Congressman Lee Zeldin basically pointed out all the times Adam Schiff has been caught lying before. And he says he doesn't even think the memo actually exists. Even Trey Gowdy is getting on Schiff's case, where Trey Gowdy basically did an interview with Fox and Friends saying that Schiff has gone out of his way to try and prevent the release of the FISA memo because it will be embarrassing for Democrats. That tells us that this memo does go beyond just the Department of Justice and just the FBI and does link back to the Democrats, either Hillary, the DNC, or the Obama White House. And Trey Gowdy is out there saying that the Democrats didn't want the investigation to find the information. They did everything they could to keep this information hidden. That's an obstruction of justice charge right there. And Trey Gowdy is predicting that when voters realize the extent that Adam Schiff went to block this information coming on out, it's going to be embarrassing for Adam Schiff. I mean, Adam Schiff went to court to help Fusion GPS to block the House Intelligence Committee, to block all these House committees, congressional committees, from finding out they paid for the dossier and that they were working for the Democratic National Committee. That's a pretty big step for a member of Congress to go through to try and block the American people from learning something. So if it was up to Adam Schiff, you wouldn't know about Hillary's email server. You wouldn't know about her emails. You wouldn't know about the dossier. So they're just ripped on into him. I think that qualifies as obstruction of justice. Now, following along with one of the calls that we got earlier today, there's this article that's coming on out here saying that if this deep state propaganda fails, if the American people don't buy that it's all Russian bots and Russian plots and the rest of it, that, yeah, it's very possible there's going to be something done to distract everybody, to make them forget about just how corrupt the FBI is, the Department of Justice, Hillary, and so forth. And frankly, the only thing I can think of that would be big enough to do that is to basically launch a major war. Someplace. Any place. Now, Trey Gowdy is out there saying that the texts that they've been able to recover show the fix was in right on January 29th, 2018. And basically saying, FBI is biased and it is corrupt. And this is not the first time the FBI has been caught red-handed violating the Constitution. But now they're seriously talking about some people need to go to jail and maybe the FBI and Department of Justice need a complete overhaul. And I would like to make a recommendation. And that is, we need to bring in some new blood. There are people outside of Washington, D.C. who are not touched by the web of drug corruption, who are qualified to work for Department of Justice and the FBI. Larry Klayman springs to mind. Tom Fitton springs to mind. You can get crime lab scientists from anywhere in the country. I'm sure they'd love to go to Washington, D.C. and work for the FBI. A lot of great museums in that city. I think the old guard needs to go because it is hopelessly corrupt. And I know the old guard likes to act like they're the only people who could possibly do the job, but that's simply not true. Now, speaking of Tom Fitton, he's made a statement regarding the departure of FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe, basically reminding everybody that Judicial Watch uncovered documents months ago that should have led to McCabe's removal. And apparently that was coincident with the Christopher Wray threatening to resign, and whatever's in that FISA memo just turned him around. But you see, there's a huge amount of information that's already out there. We've been talking about it for months. It's just officially they wanted it to go away. And it's not going to go away because we are going to keep pushing it right in the face of Americans. Everybody who listens to Republic Broadcasting, everybody who reads whatreallyhappened.com, everybody that's your friend, it's on your network list. We're going to keep on pushing this. We can force it into the mainstream media. We did it with the Downing Street memo. We've done it with a bunch of other stuff. We can do it again, and we must. We're going to take a phone call now from Steve Elkins. Aloha, Steve. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, I was talking to Ron McDonald today about these memos and also the abuse of power from Barack Obama while he was president in using intelligence to do this illegal surveillance of Donald Trump, trying to build a case of a Russian collusion that was their backup. I'm sure Hillary's hand was in that also because she had to benefit. But my question is, the abuse of power, which is a crime, by the way, nobody seems to understand an abuse of power of an office is a crime. So he's actually guilty of abuse of power, but he's also guilty of perjury going to the FISA court saying that they had authorization, they had a need to do a surveillance on Donald Trump based on faulty intelligence or basically a fabrication of what they wanted. He's guilty of perjury, Fourth Amendment violation rights of Donald Trump, and I would love to see somebody mention that. And actually, he's out of office, but he should not be immune to prosecution for having abused his powers. I would like to see that done.
Well, I'm not sure that perjury would work there because Obama himself did not personally testify in front of the FISA court. But you're right about the abuse of power. You're right about the Fourth Amendment violations. And don't forget, it's come on out recently that contrary to Obama's public statement that he only learned about Hillary's private email server from the TV news, it's now come on out he himself sent classified information to Hillary using that private email server address, and that means Barack Obama is also guilty of violating the sections of Title 18 regarding negligence in allowing classified information to be exposed in non-secure environments. And that's probably the reason why Obama quite likely gave the order to Department of Justice and to FBI to just make the email scandal go away, because it was his, he was going to look at jail time alongside Hillary Clinton.
I assume these memos would be released the day after. At least that's what they're speculating. They don't want to overshadow the State of the Union address tonight, but probably in the next day or so they should be released. Is that correct, you believe?
Yeah, you're talking about the FISA memo? Yeah, the word I'm hearing is it's going to be released as possibly as soon as right after the State of the Union speech, which is just a little more than 4 hours from now. And it may be done to deliberately overshadow the Democratic response to the State of the Union. So Trump and his people are learning how to play this game now. Okay, we got to take a break for commercials. Steve, you got anything else? I guess not. We'll be back with another phone call after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And I guess as part of the making room for all those immigrants to sit at the State of the Union, apparently a lot of Democrats are just protesting by not showing up. Which is not going to stop them from criticizing the speech after it's all over. Somebody actually put up a video where they went to a university in New York, a liberal university, and asked a bunch of students what they thought about the State of the Union speech, and they all ranted and raved about Donald Trump and this and that, apparently unaware that the speech had not actually happened just yet. And it will be happening 4 hours and 5 minutes from now. So let's go back to the phones now. We're going to talk to Tony in Pennsylvania. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I was wanting to talk about this FISA, but going back, I went to Philadelphia for the convention, Democratic convention. I was a Bernie Sanders supporter with a lot of other people. We were treated like crap. I mean, almost at every stage. And we knew that Bernie could defeat Hillary. But
Yes.
I know there's a lot of Trump supporters here, but I was just amazed at the corruption. I didn't know that till then. And now we hear about McCabe with Comey and Mueller. And it seems these people get away with everything. And Hillary and Obama. There should be some great punishment to them once they're investigated and indicted. And I think that would be to take all their money away from them.
Yeah, I mean, especially in terms of the Clintons, there's been at least one RICO statute filed, lawsuit filed against them. Unfortunately, it went before a Clinton-appointed judge who just threw the lawsuit out without looking at the merits. But at the very least, the IRS needs to take a good look at the tax-exempt status of the Clinton Foundation. Because to be a 501c3, you have to spend 51% of the money that you collect actually on the charitable work that you claim to be doing. And the Clinton Foundation didn't even come anywhere near that. So if the tax-exempt status were retroactively revoked from the foundation, then the Clintons themselves become personally liable for the taxes on all that money. And that, I think, would be a suitable punishment, for some of what they've done, not all of it. We still have to deal with the murder of Vince Foster and a whole bunch of other dead people.
That's why I think the Democrats really, and the establishment really is afraid of Trump. Because even though I'm saying I didn't vote for him and he's not the most honest man, he's a far cut over the others. And if he gets to revealing a lot of this stuff to the establishment, it's going to be big time, turmoil in D.C.
I think it's overdue. That town needs an enema. And, as long as we're going to drain the swamp anyway, what can I tell you?
Okay, Mike. Thank you.
All right, thanks an awful lot here. We're coming up here on the top of the hour. We got another caller waiting on the line, but I'm going to leave that till after station identification. Apparently, Judicial Watch is now complaining. They've asked the FBI for Andrew McCabe's text messages. So far, total stonewall. So there's something going on about McCabe the FBI is still trying to keep covered up. And it's probably going to take Judicial Watch going back to court to try and get those text messages. This is a huge mess. We could even see the entire FBI basically fired en masse and totally replaced from top to bottom. That may be what's necessary to get rid of the institutional corruption. We'll be right back after station identification. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And we're going to take a phone call from Mike in Kentucky. Aloha, Mike. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind today?
Well, I seem to remember, and I think I read it on one of your pages about William Benny, basically one of the guys over this email investigation. Trump urged or ordered him to meet with William Benny. And the news media, when they covered it, of course, called William Benny a conspiracy theorist. And I thought that was so hilarious. Here's a guy who's in the belly of the beast and called him a conspiracy theorist because of the, and I'm pretty sure it was over the idea that the packets, the timing on the packets in the emails that Julian Assange, the files that had been analyzed forensically, there's no way those files could have been sent over any internet connection because the timing of the data was too close together in the way it was stored on the jump drive or the way it was transferred off of the hard drives at the Democratic National Committee. And I'm pretty sure that's what Trump was ordering this FBI guy to meet with William Benny over. It's been 2 or 3 months ago. But the whole thing about that, I mean, I may be getting some of those details wrong, but it reminded me of every time this gets brought up, the spying stuff, I keep going back to Russell Tice and the stuff that he was claiming pre-Obama, because he was involved in the satellite division of the NSA somehow, and he was seeing orders for taps on the lines of Supreme Court Justice Alito, and even, I think, Ari Fleischer, the White House press secretary, and numerous other public officials. And, doing the math on that, what else could it be but for blackmail? And I mean, that's a spying scandal that's all through this stuff about spying on Trump and fabricating stuff. I mean, it's just gotten forgotten about. Was there ever any investigation into that?
They're spying on everybody. I mean,
of course.
You're right. It's for blackmail information. They were spying on Obama when he was still a senator. And I'm pretty convinced that they were spying on Chief Justice Roberts because of that about-face he did on Obamacare.
Yeah, what did that kind of dirt did they come up with on him? Or maybe the whole thing about Ross Perot being threatened over his daughter's wedding or something. Maybe there's truth to that all the way back, you know?
Yes.
So, I mean, how far back do we got to go for this corruption? Obviously it's coming to a head now because, it sounds like Trump's not going to put up with, but he does come off as a little pretentious. How dare you spy on me, you know? And then, he hasn't done anything to stop this massive vacuuming up of whatever bandwidth they've got capacity for. They're just sucking it all in, encrypted or not, I think, and decrypting it later if they determine that it's worth bothering with. That's what it looks like, anyway. You know, they've got certainly the infrastructure to do that.
They do, but again, I think they're targeting individuals because they can't just collect everything and make any sense out of it. It's a huge data management problem. And
that's the argument William Biddy is making, is that the way that they're doing this is ridiculously expensive and inefficient,
yes.
And they're making a ridiculously large haystack that it's making it more and more impossible to find the needles. You know,
but if you already know your target, if you already know the needle, then you can spy on them, which is apparently what NSA is doing. I mean, Edward Snowden at one point said that huge data center in Utah, it's mostly full of amateur porn that's been stolen off people's computers. So,
the blackmail people.
Your tax dollars at work, people. You know, so don't it make you just prouder than heck to be an American?
Yeah, my golly, that's national security stuff right there to hold the whole blackmail shooting match together, I guess. But and that stuff's been going on since people had video cameras. I think that's probably one of the first things that the consumer video market did was making home pornos. What was that movie? The guy Bob Crane did that. I mean, there's a movie about his venture into that. The guy from Hogan's Heroes, and whatever happened to him, nobody knows. But what I was getting at though is with Russell Tice, it seems like he's been forgotten, and he dropped some big bombshells that until Snowden's files came out, he was even sent up for mental evaluation, and he tried to go through the whistleblower process. William Binney, I think, was targeted. Him and Kurt Weib and the rest of his crew was targeted because they were trying to sell a cheaper version that would actually do. And I guess you've seen A Good American? Have you seen that, haven't you? The Good American, I think Oliver Stone helped produce it.
Oh, the Tom Cruise one. Yes, I did see it.
No. This is the one on William Binney. This is Oliver Stone's A Good American.
I was confusing with American Made. No, I haven't seen A Good American yet. I
finally saw it last weekend, and of course the interview with Tragedy and Hope, there's a lot of echoes there, but it goes through. It's an interview Raddick and Thomas Drake and the whole crew there. William Binney was taking basically a version of Thin Thread and going to the CIA. He was going to FBI. He was going to different agencies of government and pitching them on doing the very thing that he was trying to do at the NSA, but they kept shutting him down because it was too cheap. They kept coming to him with more and more money, and he's like, "Look, we can upgrade everything and do this for $300 million." Well, what can you do with $1.4 billion? They come back with more money, and that's why they fabricated evidence against him and his whole crew, is because they couldn't stop them from rewriting the software and doing it like you're talking about, filtering out and making it much more efficient and graphing your targets, with all the attributes. And so that's basically the plot line of That Good American. If you get a chance to watch it, it's less than 2 hours. I think it's on Hulu and a bunch of them, so you might rehash it.
I'll try and track that down.
That's on 99
take a look at that.
Something.
But
all right,
here's a possibility. What if all of this spying, when NSA got going, somebody made the decision saying, well, we're not really interested in tracking down cyber criminals. We know the real terrorists are not going to use anything connected to the internet anyway. So let's just use this to spy on businesses and spy on political appointees. Because I remember when Claire and I were living in Seattle, there was a big stink because of the Asia Pacific Economic Conference. And these people meet once a year, and it bops all over the Pacific. A few years ago, it was actually here in Honolulu. But one year it was in Seattle, and it's where all these business people get together to basically make deals and sign contracts for business across the Pacific. And there was a big stink because it came on out that U.S. government agents, including the FBI, were spying on the conference attendees and hacking into their computers to steal business secrets to give to Bill Clinton's cronies. To give them an advantage. They knew what the other side was going to bid for a contract. They could underbid it. And so, it's not just a few bad apples in FBI and CIA and NSA. They are institutions set up to basically steal people's business secrets, steal personal information they can be blackmailed with. That's what they're set up to do. And so they don't want anybody working in there who's saying, well, let's go find some terrorists and here's a cheap way to do it.
I've, for several years, worked next to a laundromat, and I've caught fiber optic technicians when they're in town, talking shop, kind of bored, waiting for the laundry to spin around. And I caught one of them, and he had never heard of the Room 641A and the NARIS devices. And I asked him, I said, how many times can a fiber feed be split like that? And he said, well, it depends on the power of the card. And I said, so 16 times? And he said, yeah, probably. And then I put it to him, that we only have so many agencies in the Five Eyes. How many times do we need to split that? And when you do that, is there not a way to backhaul signals into the network? In other words, you can hack back in across the splitter. And he just kind of leered at me like he had never thought about that. But I know they backhaul signals on these fiber. Because there's just a ridiculous amount of channels. If the equipment can backhaul the signals pass through, that would seem to be that there could be who knows how many ghosts in the machine in the NSA's own network, including, of course, the Mossad, in places where
Mossad doesn't need to break into NSA. Israel automatically gets a copy of everything the NSA sweeps up with no filtering whatsoever. So if the NSA has blackmail information about our members of Congress, Israel has it too.
Exactly. Nobody hardly talks about that.
And that's a piece of fiber that should be cut.
No
that fiber optic link ought to be chopped off right now.
Can we trust MI6 and MI5, really? I mean, that they haven't
trust
been
any of them. If they're an intelligence agency, they're untrustworthy. Everybody cheers for James Bond, but it is just a movie.
Well, speaking of the movie, and you mentioned Tom Clancy in Clear and Present Danger. This Cuban intelligence guy goes to work for a drug parody of the real guy, Pablo Escobedo, and he's got his baseball bat, and Harrison Ford approaches him and tells him that he's plotting against him, and he goes, hey, you can't trust a thing he says. He works for the intelligence community. He goes, you work for the intelligence community.
Yeah, that was a great moment. That was a great moment.
I'll talk to you later, man.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here. The phone lines are now empty, and we're going to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. And by the way, for those of you who were curious, actor Bob Crane was murdered. And the story came and went. A lot of strange deaths in Hollywood. I remember the founder of Panavision, Robert Gottschalk, was found murdered in his office at Panavision. This guy makes and rents cameras. Why would somebody want to kill him? They're beautiful cameras. Now, I'm a big fan of digital, but there was always something almost magic about seeing the Panavision film transport mechanism just spinning and pulling the film down. That was fun stuff. Okay, getting on back to the news. Let's talk about Robert Mueller. Because he's, the golden boy. He's out there. He's going to prove a Trump-Russia collusion. He's been at it for a year. He spent $10 million and he's got absolutely nothing. But we need to remember He himself used to be director of the FBI, and during his 11 years as director of the FBI routinely violated federal law and the Bill of Rights. Now, Mueller took over the FBI just 1 week before the 9/11 attacks, and certainly gave the impression of being pretty much clueless about it all. And was making excuses saying, well, yeah, there were these very questionable individuals taking flight lessons at flight schools, wanting to learn how to take off but not bother learning how to land. Now that should have caused some suspicion right there. And for anybody who's actually a pilot or who is trained to be a pilot, but obviously that landing part is the most important. It's also the most difficult. So, apparently, he was so bad at his job, the Wall Street Journal called for his resignation. New York Times came out with a headline saying, lawmakers say misstatements cloud FBI chief's credibility. So this guy has a long history of questionable behavior. Is this the best that we can do as head of the FBI? Or is our entire federal government just an organized crime family? And these are the kind of people they want. Come on in, cover up, blackmail. Article that came out of Lou Rockwell basically saying that at this point, it's becoming very obvious Mueller's come out with nothing. And that we're seeing the two faces of this plot. One is to frame the president for cooperating with Russia, to get him removed, and of course to keep the lid on the deep state corruption, that web of corruption that they're all tangled up in, and it's all coming on out. And we, the people, must keep pushing this. It's up to us. We can force it into the corporate media. We've done it before. It's going to take a lot of hard work. This is going to be the fight of our lives to get this stuff out there and wake people up. Okay, we're going to take another phone call. Joe in Oklahoma. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Michael, with regard to this immigration issue, I don't think everybody's taking it back far enough, because didn't the big struggle with this begin with the keepers of the children of the government officials and importing them as nannies and carrying this on to cheap labor? That's what it's all about, is bringing in cheap labor.
Well, that's certainly part of it, but the Democratic Party leadership has already come on out and said they are literally depending on illegal immigrant voters to take back Congress this November, and to win the White House in 2020. They're admitting they're bringing in illegal immigrants to vote illegally to steal the election.
And I agree, but they have turned the tables on the Republicans who started this immigration influx back in the early 90s under Bush or Clinton or whatever, and for cheap labor.
Clinton's a Democrat.
I know that, but Bush facilitated it as well. The Bushes facilitated it as well. And I'm just saying that it's cheap labor is cheap labor is cheap labor. That's what it's all about. Because
that was a factor back under Bush, but back then we had the jobs to keep most of America working, and have some for the illegal immigrants as well. But it's a very different situation today. We have roughly 100 million legal American citizens willing and able to work who have not been able to find jobs. And so it's a completely different situation. And the vast majority of these refugees and illegal immigrants do not, in fact, have any jobs. They're on welfare. They're on social programs, which is putting further strain on our economy. And we have the Democrats out there saying we need these illegal immigrants. Even with Trump getting ready to open a path to legal status for 1.8 million illegals, the Democrats are still out there saying no, make amnesty for all of them and keep the borders open. They're desperate. That's how desperate they are. to just get more of these illegals to vote. And they're still fighting against any kind of voter ID laws, tooth and nail. And it's the most ridiculous thing. And I hope Americans are going to wake up and realize there is something funny going on in a country where you have to show your ID to buy alcohol, you have to show your ID to buy tobacco, you have to have an ID to drive a car or fly a plane. But when it comes to voting, all of a sudden having to show an ID, it's racist. It's ridiculous.
I don't disagree with you at all. But, you know, by the time Amazon gets done with their robotics and filling the boxes with stuff and banding them and labeling them and shipping them out, all with robotics, we aren't going to need anybody's to do any work.
Well, that's a tremendous concern, and I've been talking about that in recent weeks, where this automation of more and more jobs with robots means more unemployment for Americans, which means Americans will have much less money to spend at fast food restaurants and Amazon. And the fact that our economic planners fail to see the link between a healthy job market and the prosperity of the consumer sector, it's amazing that they can't look ahead in time and see this will end up as a disaster. We're going to have shopping malls full of robots with nothing to do because the human customers don't have the money to come on in and buy anything.
Michael, if I may change course just a bit, there's an environmental issue that I might discuss. You know, we're concerned about GMO crops and one thing and another, and I live in north central Oklahoma, and you can go any place in western Kansas, northern Oklahoma, and there are huge, and I'm talking about millions of bushels of grain that are piled in ricks under plastic tarps. There is no way to keep the rats out of that, much less the water.
Well, that may be surplus. That may be surplus. This may be the stalks of the grain after the grain has already been milled off. Okay. Anyway, we have to take a break for commercials. So thank you very much for the phone call, and we will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, Rented Lips. Let's go right to the phones. Sean in Alaska. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind today?
Hello, Michael. Hey, I was just wanting to comment on your comment a while ago, I guess. First of all, I used to be a flight instructor. I was a commercial pilot for about 20 years. And you're talking about the terrorists being trained to take off and not land. I think that whole deal was just part of the fake story, because if you think about it, the terrorists didn't take off in the airplane. They hijacked it after it had taken off.
Yes.
So,
you make a very, very good point there. Yeah, you make a very good point. And
it's just a lot of things that people overlook.
Well, yeah, I'm convinced that 9/11 definitely was a false flag event to launch a century of unending war. And again, there are so many problems with the official story. We don't actually know who was at the controls of those airplanes. In fact, they may have been remotely controlled, because the comptroller of the Pentagon at the time, Dov Zakheim, before he was appointed by Bush, he ran a company that manufactured remote control equipment for aircraft. And there was one witness to the airplane that hit the Pentagon that it looked to him. The plane was basically just above the ground level, and he could look through the cockpit windows, and it looked to him like the flight crew was struggling with the controls. And I think what happened with Flight 93 is the crew was able to regain control of their remotely piloted aircraft, and they were going to land. And, of course, what was on the airplane wasn't going to match the official story, and that's why I think it was shot down.
Well, 93, that's the one that went into Shanksville?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, my thought on that was I always thought that was the one that was destined to go into Building 7.
Yes.
And, of course, Building 7 fell down without it ever arriving. We had to figure that one out. But I wasn't aware that there were any real credible eyewitnesses to the plane hitting the Pentagon.
Oh, there were dozens and dozens. I've got a page at my website of all these people who identified the plane. hitting the Pentagon. But you know, what's really interesting, the No Day brothers did a documentary on 9/11. And it actually started out being a documentary about the New York Fire Department and how they deal with newbies, trainees, and so forth. And while they were filming this story about this up-and-coming young firefighter, 9/11 happened, and instantly everything changed. And they were with the firefighters, the first responders, in the lobby of the World Trade Towers when the first responders are told there is a third airplane coming in. So I'm in agreement with you. Flight 93 was supposed to turn around and hit building number 7. And Flight 93 got back control of the aircraft. The flight crew got control of the aircraft, had to be shot down. So they just punched the button on the explosives inside building 7 and brought it down. And from that point on, anybody has said, boy, isn't that funny the way that building fell into its footprint? Oh, you're a wacky conspiracy theory, tinfoil hat type person.
Right. Well, are you aware of any videos of any of the planes hitting the Pentagon? I know they released a video that they claim that the airplane basically flew past the camera in between frames, I guess. You see sort of
that was the security camera footage. It's not very good. Supposedly the FBI went around to every security camera in the area and confiscated all the videos, and they've never been released. So there is this fake video that's been put on out, trying to claim that there's a cruise missile instead of a passenger jet hitting the Pentagon. When it first came on out, it was crystal clear, and you could see that the layer with the cruise missile was swimming slightly against the background. Then it went away, and when it came on out, it had been blurred hideously to hide that. And in this days of digital imagery and auto-focusing cameras, if somebody's showing you a video that's out of focus and, oh, can't you see the flying saucer or the cruise missile or Bigfoot, it's a dead giveaway that it's a faked video and they did a lousy job of it, and they're going to blur it to try and convince you. But this day and age of digital cameras, there's no more blurry photos.
Sure. Righto. Well, anyway, that's why I was calling. Just wanted to bring that
thank you
point
very
out.
much for the information, and I envy your career as a pilot because I love flying the very short time that I did it. We're going to take a break for commercials. No, actually, we've got about another minute to go. All right, Sean, thank you very much here. I have to fix this clock here. There was a change. Now, interesting little story. Howard Kurtz, he's an author, he's a media critic. He's got a new book out called Media Madness. And in the book, he's saying that FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe initiated a meeting last February when with then Chief of Staff Reince Priebus to relay he believed the New York Times piece alleging Trump campaign officials made contact with Russian intelligence was nonsense. Okay? Now, according to Kurtz, Priebus asked if the FBI could release a statement denying the report's veracity, and the former FBI deputy director said he'd have to think about it, and later on said, no, there's nothing that we could do. All right, more about this when we come on back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And we're talking about this report from Howard Kurtz in his new book, Media Madness, where he was contacted by Andrew McCabe last February, almost a year ago, and basically told Howard Kurtz that a story that appeared in the New York Times alleging contact between Trump campaign officials and Russian intelligence officials was fake. Well, then apparently Priebus asked the FBI to help discredit the story, and McCabe said, I'll have to think about it. Then he came back and said, no, there's nothing that we can do. Later, James Comey called to relay the same message. Instead of, he was offering to provide Senate Intelligence Committee investigators evidence that would discredit the report. So back there at the start of the year, they were basically not on board with this framing Donald Trump. So then CNN aired a story naming Priebus and basically saying the FBI rejected a White House request to publicly knock down the media reports about communications between Donald Trump associates and Russians known to U.S. intelligence. And Priebus was stunned by the implication that he was pressuring law enforcement and wondering if he had been set up. And I think the answer here is going to be yes. All right, we're going to take another phone call here. Tom in Florida. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind today?
Yeah, Michael, good day to you. Yeah, Michael, what is on my mind right off the bat is I want to talk about the flu epidemic and all these illegals. I remember back reading for years, back in the early 1900s, when immigrants were going through Ellis Island, they had to be inoculated. I want to know how many of these DACA and all these illegals keep pouring over our borders are being inoculated, and what kind of diseases that are bringing through the border. What are they actually bringing? We don't even know if they're Chinese or Mexican, or they could be from Saudi Arabia or Middle East. So we don't know what kind of diseases these people are actually bringing to this country. And I do, Michael, I'm not a real conspiracy theorist, but I'm starting to realize I've been looking up in the sky a lot. I've been seeing a lot of spraying, like a lot of white long lines, and I've never seen nothing like these before. I mean, usually when you have a jet stream, you understand it.
All right, Tom, let's back up a little bit. First of all, in answer to your question, back on Ellis Island, it wasn't just people being inoculated. If they were ill, they were quarantined. Or if they had certain diseases, they were put right back on the ship and sent back where they came from. With our open borders, the refugees and the illegals, they're not even being checked. It isn't until they get into the country and they go to a clinic that we find out they're bringing in scabies. That's becoming an epidemic. They're bringing in H1N1. There's been at least one reported case of the Black Plague that's out there. I think it was in Utah. And so, no, there's no checks going on at all on this. Now, as far as the white lines in the sky, we have been over this before. Chemtrails is one of the kooky things that the government likes to get the independent media to talk about to make us look kooky. They are contrails from aircraft, and under certain atmospheric conditions, they can persist for a very, very long time. Now, on commuter flights that are going back and forth between two cities, hour after hour after hour, through a moving air mass, you will get the contrails lining up next to each other. That's where that comes from. But there's nothing sinister about it. And in any event, trying to apply some kind of a spray from 35,000 feet, that's impractical. Look at crop dusters. They get right down on the ground in order to target where their dust is going. Okay?
Agree with you there. Okay. But yeah, Michael, let's talk about this then. People are dying. People are dying like crazy from the flu. They've been dying for hundreds of years for different pandemics and all that. I understand that. We're in 2018, okay? And I don't understand why. And now they're saying that some of these pharmacies don't have the Thermoflu, whatever you can buy over the counter. They're all running out of these medicines. Where's all this medicine going to, Michael? I mean, and I just don't understand. It's like it's all nonsensical stuff to me. And then you have Pelosi switching to something. She's talking about Donald Trump's trying to make America white again. What does she want, to make it brown again? Is that what what's she implying on that one?
The brown people vote for her. The white people don't. That's what's going on.
Exactly. It's all about the electoral college here. And if Donald Trump and the Republicans don't see through that, then they're going to lose. Look at California. They've lost. Forget it. Ronald Reagan came from California, and you won't get back a guy like Ronald Reagan ever again in California. The Democrats have totally ran this country ramshot, and if you have Pelosi, you have Chucky Schumer. And by the way, Michael, Chucky Schmucky Schumer, he seems like he's more concerned about Israel than he is the United States. And
well,
you don't
got
hear
a lot
about
of
Israel
company
having
on that
MS-13 gangs running all over the place. Michael? Donald Trump's going to have a speech tonight, and you're going to have a lady with MS-13 on, where her daughter got murdered, and 30 kids have been murdered in Long Island.
Slow down. Okay, you got the story wrong. Donald Trump, among his other guests, is having a mother whose daughter was killed by an MS-13 gang member who was also an illegal immigrant. It's not the mother who's MS-13.
No, I didn't say that. I meant to say that the mother going to be on with Donald Trump today on the stage, and she's going to, I guess, maybe tell her story, what happened to her daughter. I didn't know that she was an illegal. I didn't know that, honestly. But I know that her daughter was murdered, and there's 30 other cases.
The mother is not, Tom, the mother is not an illegal. The mother is a legal citizen. The daughter who was murdered was a legal citizen. It was the MS-13 gang members who were illegals. Okay, Tom, you gotta slow down. Gotta think carefully about what it is you're getting ready to say.
Right, okay. But my point is this. Why are these gangs even in this country, Michael? They're not in Israel. They're not, they don't have that, Schumer, Mr. Chucky Schmucky Schumer, and Israel has a wall around it, Michael.
Yes, I know, I understand that. Point. And Israel is very selective about who they allow to live in their country. The question I have is, apparently the Democrats are bringing in actual illegal immigrants to try and these are good people. They're, we need to support them. In fact, the Democrats' latest thing is it's immoral to deny anybody who wants to come to this country permission and assistance to come here. Morality's got nothing to do with it. We're talking basic economics and practicality and not allowing criminals into our country. But my question is going to be, these illegal immigrants are criminals. Are they not going to be arrested as they sit on the floor of the Congress?
That's a great point. I was talking about that with my brother today. They should be arrested. If they're there in Washington protesting Trump, why isn't ICE arresting them right on the spot? They're breaking the law. They're here illegally.
They absolutely should. And,
right.
Again, the Democrats the Democrats are following a simple rule. Okay, the white people vote Republican, the non-white people vote Democrat. And they're trying to basically re-engineer our population, to give them a permanent lock on the machinery of government.
Absolutely correct. I mean, out of the park. It's actually what they're trying to do. And, I don't know, Michael. I think we're in peril with this situation with these Democrats because, and I also look at the Supreme Court. I told you this in the past. The Supreme Court, they're what 2%? The Zionists are 2% of the population. Yet they have 4 members on the Supreme Court. It's unbelievable.
They are overrepresented there. And if you go back and you look at that corporate media chart that Assange just put on out, and you read through the names of all those top executives, you'll see the same thing there. They've got a lot there as well.
Exactly. It's just it's mind blowing. And I don't know. I still say with this immigration situation.
I'll tell you what's going on here. Americans are being raised to not discriminate, to not be racist, and we're so obsessed that we never do that we don't recognize when we ourselves are being discriminated against.
Absolutely. Totally agree.
Okay.
I can tell you this, Michael, as far as immigration goes, and in South Florida and Texas and California, all the places I've been through, Arizona, they have more stations in Spanish than they do in English. Radio, TV, and no other. The Italians don't have that. The Germans don't have that. The Polish don't have that. The Swedes, the Danes, they don't have all these TV stations and radio stations. When they were coming through Ellis Island and kept their culture as far as the language goes, I don't know why is there like a double standard only with this one group here. I mean, they have all
I'll tell you why.
TV
because Tom, give me a turn. The reason is very simple. These other ethnic groups who have come to this country, they learn English, and so they can use the English-speaking TV and radio. In fact, they listen to it to help develop their English skill. Unfortunately, the illegals coming over the border from Mexico, if you read some of the stuff that's coming out of organizations like Azatlan, their attitude is, well, this all used to belong to us, so Spanish should be the language. And they literally refuse to learn English. And that's why entrepreneurs have set up these Spanish language TV and radio. Now, here in Hawaii, we have a very it's a Polynesian society, and so we do have radio stations in a wide variety of languages.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's
okay,
La Raza. That's La Raza behind that. La Raza.
I know, Michael, you're right. Well, I thought, what's the organization that wants to give California back to Mexico?
La Raza.
That's La Raza? Okay. There was another one that begins with an A. Okay, Tom, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go here. Okay. that could be it. All right. So thank you for the phone call. We're going to let you go. I got to get back to the news. I'm way behind on the talking points here. It turns out Hillary Clinton may be out there talking about, sexual harassment and, how proud she is of women who've, gone forward. But she's got another scandal, another hypocrisy on her hands. Apparently back in 2008, during her campaign, her faith advisor, Burns Strider, was accused of sexual harassment by a young female staffer, and according to two sources, Strider's behavior included inappropriate touching, kissing the staffer's forehead, I don't know if that's that big a deal, and sending her suggestive emails. However, rather than terminate Strider, the staffer resigned. Strider was allowed to remain in his role, where apparently he went on to continue to harass other young women. And Hillary Clinton was apparently okay with it. But then, of course, she should have been used to all of that from Bill. Story here, apparently Gowdy, again, another statement, is saying the State Department aided and abetted the Clinton email cover-up. And Trey Gowdy is out there saying everybody who worked at the Department of State knew Hillary was shaking people down for cash. People who had business before the State Department. Pay for play. Apparently they were hauling bales of cash into the building. I mean, bales. Huge amount. And then, of course, there was the cover-up of the private email server. And, yeah, this has all got to come on out. This has to come on out. Over at the DNC, their CEO has quit just 8 months into the job. Apparently, their major donors are getting skittish. The DNC is very short on cash. The 2016 election revealed just how rampant corruption is throughout the Democratic National Committee. And, of course, they're still haunted by the ghost of Seth Rich. So, veteran Democratic operative Jess O'Connell has left her job as CEO, citing personal reasons. No official reason has been given. Now, at this point, with the FISA memo about to come on out, and this web of corruption to be exposed, I think any time somebody resigns or retires and says, I want to spend time with my family, or it's personal reasons, you have to put them on the list of potential. I stress potential involvement in what's been going on here. Remember, former Congresswoman Corrine Brown? She got sentenced to 5 years for stealing money from a children's charity. And apparently she reported to prison today, and for some reason decided she was going to show up in a luxury Mercedes minibus. No sense of shame. No sense of shame at all here. Congressman Gates is out there saying the Clinton crime network is full of cornered rats. Yeah, and I imagine they're all very nervous. And not just because of what the investigations might do. Everybody in the government, everybody in the CIA who knows the Clinton secrets, they all now have bullseyes on their back. They all know about the dead bodies list. They all know that there are live liabilities if the investigation starts going in a certain direction. And around the Clintons, live liabilities don't stay alive very long. Remember we were telling you about the one yesterday where the founder of Russia Today, originally they said he died of a heart attack. Then the autopsy said no, he was obviously beat up to all kinds of blunt force trauma. And the FBI came back out and said, okay, he beat himself to death. Which we expect that kind of absurdity from the FBI. And again, going all the way back to the incident that inadvertently launched my career, that the murder of White House Deputy Counsel Vincent Foster. The FBI was there involved in the cover-up. They fabricated evidence in terms of Lisa Foster's recognition of the gun found with the body. The gun found with the body had been wiped clean after it was used. And I'm pretty sure Vince Foster didn't do that himself. Okay, apparently HarperCollins is getting ready to release a book called Secret Empires, written by Breitbart News senior editor Peter Schweitzer, and basically how our politicians hide corruption and enrich their families and friends. Not much is known about the book's contents, but 5 images on the book's cover suggest that Schweitzer's next targets may include Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, former Vice President Joe Biden, former President Barack Obama, former Secretary of State John Kerry, and President Donald Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner. And according to the publisher, Secret Empires will expose vast corruption by top Washington figures who leverage their political power to get rich, often by helping grease deals with foreign entities, like Uranium One. We'll be back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're coming up on the top of the hour. We're about 3 hours away from the State of the Union speech. So let me just get this done here. Like I said, it's a one-man shop. And, okay, we're good to go. Now, getting on back to the scandals. Now, we all know about Uranium One. Ross Atom wanted to lease basically large areas of the United States to mine uranium. Some of it was underneath that wildlife reservation where there was that standoff. And all during this, huge amounts of Russian money were pouring into the Clinton Foundation. So we all know about that story, but there's another one that's coming on out. And this is another Clinton pay-to-play operation. And Obama administration officials handed over control of Port Canaveral's cargo container operations to the brother of Saddam Hussein's chief nuclear physicist and weapons of mass destruction designer, Dr. Jafar Dia Jafar. Well, I guess if he's out of the business of making weapons of mass destruction, yeah, why not run a shipping terminal? The reason this is very questionable is because obviously Port Canaveral, Cape Canaveral, it's home to a U.S. Navy submarine base. It sits within the nexus of U.S. Air Force and NASA space operations. It's also the second largest cruise ship port in the world. And it's now under control of a foreign national. Now, normally we don't do a lot of entertainment news, but I had to talk about this. I saw this article basically chastising the Grammy Awards. And they were basically making fun of the fact that all of the people at the Grammys were wearing white to show support and solidarity for the Me Too and Time's Up movements, which are about sexual harassment of women. And apparently Kesha sang a song about her own experience with this, and the audience was crying. But then you go on to get the actual winners. Best Pop Solo Performance, Ed Sheeran won for a song about getting a woman drunk and taking her home to have sex with her. And so there's the problem. And if you think TV and film is bad, you ought to look at some of the stuff that's out there in pop music. But that's what people are buying. But this article wanted to say, oh, they're being hypocrites. Well, they are. This is in the Daily Mail. And I happened to notice after this chastising of the Grammys for hypocrisy, over in the right margin, there's this little bunch of tile stories where they had basically nude photos of Kim Kardashian and Emily Ratajkowski. So glass houses, stones, things like that. We'll be back with hour number 3 after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And We are 3 hours away from the State of the Union speech, or at least when it's supposed to officially start. I'm going to make a prediction that Trump is going to delay his entrance to build the suspense. It's a cheap vaudeville trick, but what can you do? So let's talk about the war zones, emphasis on the plural. A lot of stuff going on out there. A lot of concern that the U.S. government has reached the point where the only way they think they can distract the American people from the crashing economy and all the corruption in government is to just get a good old-fashioned world war going. Come on, it'll be fun. And so we're seeing articles like this one in Sputnik News, where it's only a matter of time before Daesh launches chemical attacks in the West. This is coming from the head of the Department of Homeland Security, Kirstjen Nielsen. And she said it in a speech at the Woodrow Wilson Center on Monday. Now, to me, knowing that ISIS was a U.S. manufactured group, what Department of Homeland Security is doing is informing us there's going to be a false flag attack to remind us that we're supposed to believe that ISIS and Al-Qaeda are the enemy, even though Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton were sending them all kinds of weapons in Syria. I would not be surprised if there was some kind of an upset at the State of the Union. That's how desperate the Democrats are right now to just keep this FISA memo from going any further. Apparently, the neoconservatives in Washington, D.C. are now lobbying for action in Syria. And basically what they're responding to is the fact that the U.S. got humiliated. They spent all those years in Syria trying to get Bashar al-Assad. They tried to cover it up by claiming, well, first of all, they said, Bashar al-Assad, he's evil. He's an evil man. We have a duty to save those poor Syrian people from the man they keep electing to be their leader. Sounds like the FBI if you think about it. And then it was, Assad is gassing his own people. But because we all remember the lies about Saddam's nuclear weapons, that one didn't get a lot of traction. They tried it 3 separate times. And then they tried to say, well, we're not in Syria to harm the Syrians. We're just there as part of the war on terror to get ISIS and Al-Qaeda. And now the Russians and the Syrians have pretty much mopped up ISIS and Al-Qaeda. And the U.S. is stuck. They're refusing to leave, even though they don't legally have a reason to be there. There's been no congressional declaration of war against Syria. There's no United Nations Security Council authorizing the United States to be there. They're standing on somebody else's nation and saying, we refuse to move. And so now the neocons are out there saying, we've got to do something. Okay, neocons, here are your rifles, here are your parachutes, here are your Dayglow orange jumpsuits left over from the CIA torture centers. Watch your heads crowding into that transport plane, and we'll call Bashar al-Assad and tell him you are on your way to whip his butt all by yourself. But you're not going to have the support of the American people because we are tired of war. All these wars, all over the world. It was a shock to find out that the United States Pentagon has special operations groups in 3/4 of the nations on the globe. We've got soldiers in military action that we know nothing about. Remember what a shock it was to find out what was going on in Niger. Boy, there is something very big flying past outside here. Now, apparently, let's say this would have been yesterday, the Syrian Arab Army and the Tiger forces fully secured the town of Abu al-Duhur in eastern Idlib. They've clashed with Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, the Syrian branch of Al-Qaeda. And meanwhile, pro-militant sources reported the Syrian Air Force and Russian aerospace forces started conducting airstrikes in the area of Sarakib. Now, there's another very interesting story that's come on out here. And this one is sourced from Fort Rust, which is generally a very reliable source of information. Apparently, in Syria, a Turkish military convoy entered northern Syria and were allowed to travel through territory controlled by the Al-Qaeda-affiliated al-Nusra Front. This was caught on video taken by an al-Nusra militant. So the Turkish military brought a dozen armored vehicles from Turkey's Hatay province and has attempted to take up positions near the Syrian army. So is Turkey coming on the side of the terrorist groups? Is there now going to be outright war between Syria and Turkey? It looks like it. Very confusing over there. Turkey wants to get the Kurds, but they're supporting al-Nusra against the Syrian army. I don't know that Russia will sit still for this. Russia backed off from Turkey going after the Kurds, didn't want to get involved in that mess. But if Turkey literally attacks the Syrian army, it's going to be game on. And then the U.S. will have their excuse to come on in and say, well, we're going to be on the side of Turkey against Syria and those gosh darn Russians. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. And another story from the Post News saying exactly the same thing I just got done. Will the U.S. fight Turkey? American soldiers are refusing to leave a city about to be attacked, where they're basically involved with the Kurdish forces. So apparently in the Kurdish areas, the U.S. is on the side of Syria fighting Turkey, and in the non-Kurdish areas, the U.S. is going to be on the side of Turkey fighting Syria and the Russians. That's how crazy this is getting. That's how crazy this is getting. Now the story out of Sputnik News, the U.S. is sending in additional forces and equipment to Afghanistan, but at this point they don't seem to actually have a strategy. After all these years in Afghanistan, Afghanistan has now become America's longest running war. I think the only reason they're still pouring troops and equipment in there is so they don't have to admit that they lost. U.S. forces in Afghanistan have faced a 35% jump in casualties over the past year. And they're just going to take some more of other people's children and send them all in there to be bullet stoppers, rather than admit that they, like so many other countries, are unable to get Afghanistan under control. There is a reason it is called the graveyard of empires. The British learned that, the Soviet Union learned it, and Putin's got to be laughing his head off that the United States was dumb enough to walk into that trap. The last military commander who succeeded in conquering all of Afghanistan was Alexander the Great, and he only kept it for 3 years. Story coming out of Russia Insider. Apparently it looks like the Trump administration is arming Kiev, and that's why a big war in Ukraine is imminent. And the immediate goal is to reintegrate Donbass. But I think with all the Russia bashing we've seen, and I can't believe they're stupid enough to try this because I don't think we can win it, but my read is that the U.S. wants to start a war with Russia. And they're going to do it in Syria and they're going to do it at Ukraine, probably both together. And that will be their distraction. Oh, we're at war with Russia. Forget all about the corruption. Forget about the economy. Forget about the homelessness. You've got to salute the flag and get with the program. We've got to get those gosh darn Russians. Wouldn't be the first time the U.S. has done this. They've done it before. Every time they get into a real mess, they get involved in a world war to distract everybody from it. Crash of 1907, World War I. Crash of 1929, World War II. Crash of 2008, and boy, they got all the forces in place. War in Ukraine, war across Europe. Those poor Europeans are going to get it again. Now, apparently, Putin and Netanyahu have had another meeting, and not much is coming out of it. Apparently, Benjamin Netanyahu flew to Moscow. This is their 7th face-to-face meeting in the last 2 years. What's really coming out of this that's interesting is both Putin and Netanyahu are basically talking about the power vacuum left by the U.S. in the Middle East. In other words, they're already seeing that the U.S. has lost in Syria, and they're losing momentum to complete their program of conquering all those other countries. The U.S. is bogged down in Libya. They're bogged down in Yemen. They're bogged down in Syria. They're bogged down in Afghanistan. They've got too many wars going on all at once. They're losing this one. Now, do you remember a while back when Donald Trump decided to basically cut military support for Pakistan, saying that Pakistan had been lying to the United States about their commitment in the war on terror, and that we had wasted all this money by giving it to Pakistan. Well, it wasn't really a waste because Pakistan was taking that money and using it to buy American-made weapons. So it's still a giveaway, but the money was returning back to the United States and our economy. Well, no more. Now that Trump has halted the military aid, Pakistan is going to start buying all their weapons from Russia and China. And it's a practical move. They're much less expensive, and they seem to work much better as well. Now, apparently, the United States is courting Vietnam as an ally to block China's maritime expansion, try and get them out of the South China Sea. If you're my age, you remember when Vietnam was the enemy. They're the bad guys. They called them gooks. Now they're our friends. They're our friends. They're going to help us get China. Wasn't all that long ago when China was our friend. And Russia was our friend. Remember after the fall of the Soviet Union, we're all going to be friends. We're all going to have peace through commerce. We're going to do business together. Not anymore. The U.S. is out there saying, you're an enemy, and you're an enemy, and you're going to be an enemy, and you're an enemy, and you're an enemy again. It is psychotic, for lack of a better word. Okay, we're going to take a phone call now. Ron in Missouri, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, I know you already covered this subject, but this might be way far out there, but do you think there's any possibility they might have weaponized the flu or testing it?
Well, it's no secret that USAMRIID has been working on weaponizing influenza for many, many years, and there are labs that work on this under contract, and there have apparently been accidents where somebody will drop a beaker, and there will be a flu outbreak, a serious flu outbreak, around these laboratories. As far as the origin of our current flu, it is rather amazing that this one pathogen seems to mutate and change so rapidly. And that's why we have a flu season. Like it's scheduled event, flu season, like baseball season and football season. It's time for flu season. Go and buy your flu shot. But whether there's a nefarious purpose behind all these flu variants that have come on out now, we really don't know, and I haven't seen any indication. But I will tell you, remember back in 2009, they were making a big deal about that swine flu and how deadly it was. And of course, it came and went, and it wasn't even as serious as the normal seasonal flu. But it made Roche Pharmaceuticals rich from all the Tamiflu sales. And it turned out that the genome of that flu was a very weird variant. It had human flu DNA, had bird flu, and also pig flu, which is why I called it the when pigs fly flu. And that seems like a very rare occurrence to have these three different flus in one pathogen. And then I found a paper from the CDC from like about 3 or 4 years before where they were synthesizing that very thing in the laboratories. So who knows? Maybe, I'm sorry, what?
Go ahead. Go.
No, I mean, that was basically the story here.
Mm-hmm. The thought this has crossed my mind many times, and I don't know. But all right. I love your show.
All right, thank you very much here. I mean, there certainly are people who think there are too many human beings. And actually, I'm one of them. Overpopulation is a problem, and it always will be, because sex is a lot more fun than dying. But my problem with the population control people is they want somebody else to go without children or to die early. And that's a degree of playing God that I cannot subscribe to. But I know we've talked before about covert sterilization campaigns masquerading as vaccination programs in the third world. And it's entirely possible that somebody is looking at weaponizing a pathogen to get rid of most of the human population. Maybe something on the variation of Ebola, the Mayinga strain of Ebola. That's a 90% mortality rate. Maybe that bleeding eye disease they've got in Uganda. That's a 40% mortality rate. Okay, getting on back to the war zones here because we're running out of time here. Apparently, and surprisingly, or at least this is what's being put on out, Secretary of Defense James Mattis is trying to talk President Trump out of an attack on North Korea. Basically saying that if North Korea were to attack us or Japan or South Korea or Guam, that the U.S. military can deal with it. Okay, and we don't need to do a preemptive strike, because if we start a war with North Korea, he's saying it would be a disaster. And it might very well be that Mattis, being the Secretary of Defense, understands that we're just stretched way too thin under too many battlefields. And obviously that wasn't the plan. They were going to take over Afghanistan, put in an obedient puppet government, go on over to the next country, pick them off one by one by one. And instead, every one of these wars has turned into a quagmire. We're having to garrison the entire planet, and we just don't have the force for it. So it's a bit of a surprise. But again, I have to tell you, and I'm not going to go into details for the very obvious reason, there's a lot of military cargo transport aviation going in and out of the air base down here at the bottom of the hill. And Pearl Harbor's almost completely empty. And I find that a troubling sign here. Over in Russia, they have revived production of the Tu-160 Blackjack supersonic strategic bomber. This is the world's largest supersonic bomber. And apparently, they were building a lot of them under the old Soviet Union. And when the Soviet Union fell, they simply stopped. But apparently, there's a lot of existing parts and frames so that they can revive the production. And it's an amazing-looking aircraft. And it's kind of weird because I'm opposed to war and I'm opposed to killing people. But sometimes some of those machines they come up with, they look cool. Let's just find something to do with them that doesn't hurt people. All right, economic news, and I realize most of this talking points are going to have to go over to tomorrow. Remember all those Russian sanctions? Well, doesn't really apply if we need something. And apparently the tanker Gasless, which is carrying the first shipment of Russian liquefied natural gas, has pulled into a port near Boston, Massachusetts. So, yes, we're sanctioning you, except for the gas. We need the liquefied natural gas. Now, apparently over in Russia, there is a CEO of one of their major banks is out there saying that if the U.S. pushes the anti-Russian sanctions, it could mean war. And he's saying the U.S. should probably remove their ambassador from Moscow if they're going to continue down this path. We're going to take a break for some commercials, and we'll be back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Now, yesterday, there was this really kind of weird story where a U.S. government official was talking with the Russian ambassador and saying, we're getting ready to release this sanctions list, and please try not to be too upset about it. And that's kind of a weird thing to do. Well, it turns out the caution was well advised because apparently this new sanctions list from the U.S. Treasury, they're calling it the Kremlin list because it includes virtually the entire Russian leadership. and it signals a breakdown in relations between the United States and Russia. And formally they have relations, but basically targeting the entire country's leadership, the relations are breaking down. They're calling it a gross interference in Russia's internal affairs. And yeah, it's a provocation. So we get back to this idea, is the U.S. government really stupid enough to try and start a war with Russia? Because you know China's going to come on Russia's side. Every one of these nations that is sick and tired of U.S. interference in their internal affairs are going to come in on the other side. This will go nuclear. On the day when the United States government realizes they cannot win this coming war conventionally, they will push those buttons. And it'll be a bad day for anybody not wearing 2 million sunblock. All right, let's talk about the economic news. Bit of a roller coaster ride on the Dow. At one point, it was down almost 400 points. And they're saying that apparently there was a sell-off of Amazon stocks or Berkshire Hathaway. Apparently Amazon and Berkshire Hathaway and one other company are starting a whole new healthcare business, and for some reason that spooked the market. I noticed even the cryptocurrencies took a hit today, whether people are getting out of those positions. Story coming out, Investment Watch blog, apparently people on Wall Street are saying this is the peak. This is the peak. And they're desperate to get new investors to come on into the stock market to try and push it back up again. But after today's nearly 400-point drop on the Dow, Americans don't have money to put into the stock market. They really, really don't. And the run-up to the big crash of 1929 was fueled in part by getting ordinary Americans who didn't have risk capital to play with to come on into the stock market through things like margins, which was a way of basically loaning people most of the money to buy an issue of stock. Especially in our current economy, for anybody out there, the very last thing that you should do is borrow money to invest in the stock market, or borrow money to invest in cryptocurrencies, or borrow money to invest in anything. You shouldn't be playing investments anywhere if you don't have risk capital that you can afford to lose, which means all your bills are up to date, you're not in any danger of losing your house, and you've got all this extra money, maybe 6 months of your income. And instead of buying a cabin cruiser or a fishing boat, you can go and play the market, if that's what you want to do. Story coming on out here, basically saying that the Federal Reserve itself is going to ignite the next financial crisis. And it has to do with this belief that has taken hold on Wall Street that they're at a permanently high plateau for all the markets. Well, that was something that was also being thought about or believed in back in 1929. And I know this because when I was back doing movies, I worked on the movie version of the book, The Day the Bubble Burst, about the crash of 1929. And our technical consultant for the show was the author of the book, William Hupt. And he was saying that, yeah, after there was a dip in the markets in August of that year, and the markets quickly recovered, and the consensus opinion was there would be no more big crashes, that the markets were stable and they were going to stay stable. And then, of course, October happened and it changed. The problem we have really is that economics, and especially banking, aren't really science. They're belief systems. They're religions. And they operate the way they're designed to operate. And yes, there's a lot of spreadsheeting and stuff going on. But there's no real scientific basis for some of the assumptions that are used to drive the economy. And every once in a while they'll change. Again, going back to Nobel Prize winning mathematician John Nash. He got his doctoral dissertation basically proving that Adam Smith was wrong. Everybody being personally greedy for themselves does not advance the entire economic system, and in point of fact, can cause it to lock up, which we have seen generally. All right, we're coming up here on another commercial break. When we come on back, more about the economy and just whatever else we're going to fit in for the rest of the show. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And I've gotten a few emails, more than a few. People are telling me stories about how their banks are very reluctant to let them have large amounts of cash. It's their money. It's in their savings account. It's in their checking account. But there's always that resistance. They'd rather you put it on plastic or put it in a cashier's check or something like that. And so I found this article by Ann Barnhart basically saying that banks do not have a right to deny you cash withdrawals. Of course, we all know the banks want to go to a cashless society in order to prevent an eventual run on the bank. What they want to get rid of is any portable store of value you can keep in your pocket. So the money is locked inside their banks no matter how badly they're mismanaging it. Now what banks can do is for large withdrawals, they can require advance notice of like a week. So they can order the cash in special for your withdrawal because believe it or not, banks don't actually have a lot of cash in their branch offices. They have just enough to get through the day. And I've actually, at our local bank, I've actually seen a couple of cases where we get in there late in the day and they're literally running out of cash. So there isn't all that much in there, which obviously makes it less attractive to be robbed as well. But and of course, if you're over $10,000, they do have to file a transaction report with the government because you may be a terrorist or you may be running drugs. And members of Congress want a piece of that action. Apparently, Commonwealth Bank has been caught rigging a key market interest rate just a day after appointing a new chief executive. They're all crooks over there. They're all crooks over there. Toys R Us is refusing to release its holiday sales data. That's a red warning sign. And again, they're closing another 160 stores. Talking about immigration, there was a document that's been leaked out, and it appears to be genuine. I looked at it. It was over on Scribd, where apparently Representative Maxine Waters wrote this letter to One United Bank detailing her plan to bring in 41,000 refugees from Somalia. Now, this went viral all over the internet. Maxine Waters is claiming the document is a fake and it's a hoax to make her look bad. You have to decide for yourself on that one. Border Control agents pulled over a tractor trailer in Texas and found 76 undocumented immigrants stuffed inside the trailer rig. This was on Highway 83 near Laredo. Now, that truck driver would be liable for a Title VIII indictment for aiding and abetting. Apparently 2 DACA dreamers have been arrested for human smuggling. 2 separate incidents in 1 week. These are people who came under the deferred action of childhood arrivals, but they're acting like adults here. And apparently one of the 2, their DACA protections had expired, and they were both arrested for human smuggling. In other words, they were going down to the border, grabbing some illegal immigrants and driving them to other places inside the United States. One of the incidents took place in Torrey Pines State Beach in San Diego. I've been there. It's very, very beautiful. And apparently the other one was Interstate 5 near Dairy Mart Road. And I'm wondering if Nancy Pelosi are going to invite these dreamers to the State of the Union. That would be an interesting thing to have happen. Now here is a little bit of good news. As you know, there's been this big stink that's been raised over laws being passed by state governments requiring teachers to certify they will not boycott Israel before they're allowed to teach. Now, those state governments are starting to be just as corrupted as our federal government in terms of their obeisance to Israel. The state government is supposed to be there to take care of the state. But apparently, there's been a challenge to this law in Kansas, and the judge agreed that the law that says you must promise not to boycott Israel is a violation of your First Amendment right to freedom of speech. And hopefully this will set a precedent where they're going to be able to go across the country and say, yeah, boycotting is a recognized nonviolent form of protest against the actions of the government of Israel. And any effort by our government to stop that is a Bill of Rights violation. It's a First Amendment violation. And shame on our politicians for putting the interests of Israel above our Constitution and our Bill of Rights. Now, Ben Swann, a lot of stuff going on with him. He'd been hired by CBS 46 in Atlanta. Then all of a sudden he was fired. And apparently he was fired because he wanted to bring back his reality check segments independent of and his work for the station. So in other words, CBS was not going to have anything to say with it, and they basically canned him. Well, the news is now good. Truth in Media is back. Apparently, they found an angel, a donor, who funded them. So Truth in Media is back. Ben Swann is back. Reality Check is back. And we look forward to seeing that because he just did a fabulous job. Absolute, fabulous job. And I'm looking forward to seeing Reality Check again. Now, there's a story circulating that a British tribunal next month is formally going to set Julian Assange free. And apparently this was something that President Trump asked for when he met with British Prime Minister Theresa May. The tribunal meets on February 6th, and apparently thereafter Assange will be free to leave the Ecuadorian embassy in London without fear of arrest. This is coming from Reuters. And Reuters reported that a spokesman for the Crown Prosecution Service has affirmed that a successful ruling on February 6th by Chief Magistrate Emma Arbuthnot would allow Assange to walk free. Now, Ecuador announced on the 11th of this month, Ministry of Foreign Affairs had naturalized Assange as a citizen of that nation and given him diplomatic status as well. So he's covered by diplomatic immunity. So finally, Assange is getting out of that building, and I understand he's got to be dealing with some health issues. Now, do you remember when the fake news thing first came on out? And there was this organization called Prop or Not, short for Propaganda or Not. And this was this self-proclaimed Russian propaganda watchdog, and they were held aloft as experts by outlets like the Washington Compost, the New York Slimes, the Atlantic, and basically an investigative journalist has now discovered that Prop or Not links to the Atlantic Council and the U.S. State Department. Now, Prop or Not created a database of 200 websites that they claim to be Russian propaganda. And it includes Drudge Report, I think it includes me, Truth Dig, Black Agenda Report, and basically calling for all these outlets to be investigated, unlisted from Google and Facebook, and prevented from pushing propaganda. And Radio Sputnik's Lee Stranahan observed that Prop or Not's apparent definition of a Russian propaganda outlet was simply any credible outlet that criticized the Ukrainian government, as well as any outlets that do not take a dim view of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. Now, remember when the Washington Post came out with their list of Russian propaganda outlets? And I was definitely on that list. It was a proud moment in the history of WhatReallyHappened.com. And it turned out their entire criteria for being a Russian propaganda outlet was that you linked to Russia Today. That was it. No proof of communication, no proof that anybody was being paid by Russia to push the propaganda, because nobody lies for free. Lying pays a good salary. We tell the truth for free. If you want to tell lies, you can go to work for the public relations firm, and you can make decent money there. All right, we're going to take a phone call from Mateus in Canada. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, how is my favorite Russian propaganda star doing today?
Well, you're working on it, building up the biceps, you know.
Okay, kind of like a lighter call today, a couple of things. You caller yesterday saw a funny Black Lives Matter bumper sticker. It said, Black Lives Matter, white silence is violence, which is just so silly. It's kind of nonsensical. It's like, of all the things you could pick. Okay, so I'm driving, 2 days ago, I'm in traffic, and I see a car got one bumper sticker that says Black Lives Matter, and the other one says, art saves lives. It's like, it's so silly. Like, what are you talking about? Anyway, I want to tell you what I assume.
Anytime I see a car that's got a lot of bumper stickers on it that don't seem to go with each other and don't make sense, I assume that the car has started to rust on through, and they're just using the bumper stickers to hide the rust spots.
That's a very plausible theory. But I wouldn't really trust anything coming from a Russian propagandist. Anyway, okay, a slightly funny vaccine story. So I was at my local shopping market, and it said get the shingles shot, and then below that there was a disclaimer basically saying it doesn't really work. And I was couldn't believe it, the honesty of it. So I went to get the ingredients list, and they gave me this happy little pamphlet. And then I said, no, I want the insert, and they said, we don't have it. And I had to get a manager and demand it. And then I said, I have a legal right to it. Then she closed out this, like, big, thick 8.5 by 11 pound, like, stack of papers. So she had a legal obligation to give it to me. She knew it, but they're lying to me before that. So then I go home and I read it, and it says, this is a partial list of the ingredients. To get a full list, go to the government website, BC Immune website. So I go to the website, and all it will give me is a generic list of possible ingredients in every vaccine. So then I finally have to call a person, and they say that I have to go to the pharmacy to get that.
Yes.
So it's a complete runaround. They literally made it impossible for me to know what's in the shingles shot. And so just the last thing, I started becoming a joke writer 6 months ago, so I'm just going to leave you with an original joke. They're all very family-friendly.
Okay.
Hey, did you hear about the cow that had the cosmetic breast enlargement surgery?
No, I have not.
Oh, it was utterly ridiculous. Okay.
Okay. All right.
I'll leave you with that.
Well, thank you for that one, Mateus. I think on that line we're going to let you go. And thank you for the joke. Talk to you later. I'm sure you'll be back. Here's a good story about how sometimes all of this screaming about mandatory equality can backfire. Now, this has to do with the issue of female BBC employees complaining they weren't paid as well as male employees at the BBC. And they didn't want to hear anything about quality of work or difficulty of work or qualifications coming on in. They wanted absolute equality for payment for men as women. And the BBC said, okay, we can do that. And they cut the pay on the male employees to make it all gender equity. I'm sure those male BBC employees are going to be just absolutely thrilled with these women for doing that. Apparently, Michigan law enforcement is doing a really good job because the state prison population has hit a 20-year low, and as a result, the Michigan Department of Corrections is closing a prison in March, unless they want to rent them out to other states. Hawaii actually, because we're so short on land. I mean, there's a city jail in Honolulu, and then there's a prison in Halava, up in the Ko'olau Mountains here. But a lot of our prisoners that are serving long sentences are actually sent to Colorado. Hawaii pays Colorado to basically house them. Maybe we should work a deal with Michigan here. apparently Josh and Lolly Weed, there's an unfortunate last name for you, they live in Utah, and back in 2012 they became briefly notorious because they got married to prove their commitment to the Mormon Church. And they got married even though Josh Weed self-identified as gay. And his wife said, yes, I know he's gay, I accept it, but we are committed to the Mormon Church, we're going to get married. Well, didn't work out. They're now getting a divorce here. Getting on back to the issue of the flu, this is a serious illness. And apparently the numbers are going through the roof. And the numbers at the CDC always seem to be about a week behind, but it's not showing any signs of slowing. So please follow the normal precautions, which is face masks if you're going out in public. Be very careful about touching surfaces and then your face, the usual kind of stuff that you see. If you start running a fever, go to your primary care medical provider or urgent care or something like that. And I've noticed that a lot of people in the media, they stopped giving that advice because apparently the hospitals are full. The urgent cares are full. They're running out of supplies. Apparently they did not expect this serious a flu. And of course, part of the problem is that this year's flu shot is only at best 10% effective. Now, here's an interesting story. This came out of Natural News. Somebody did a study published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, and it finds that people who receive the flu shots emit more than 6 times as many flu virus particles into the air compared to non-vaccinated individuals. In other words, the flu shot is causing the flu. It's spreading the flu. It's a good way to build a business. It's been reported before that people who get shots for mumps and measles can give that disease to people around them. Apparently there's a new issue regarding vaccines. In addition to autism, it can damage kidneys. And the doctor who basically came up with that information, he's already being attacked by the medical establishment, the media. Oh, he's one of those anti-vaxxers. He's a vaccine denier, like Holocaust denier. He's denying vaccines are good. All right, we're going to take a break. We'll be back with the last segment of our program after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Now, over in Iran, Tehran has been hit by a massive winter storm, and it's just blanketed with over a meter of snow. Roads have been closed, airports and schools, and apparently the Iranians are just thrilled because it's very rare for Tehran itself to get snow. And they've got to be very happy because they've also been dealing with a drought over there, and so this snow hopefully will ease that a little bit. Well, Bill Nye can't really seem to get a break because, as you know, up until now, he's been a champion of this idea of human-caused global warming. But he's made the decision that he's going to accompany Republican Representative Jim Bridenstine, who is Trump's nominee for NASA administrator, to the State of the Union address. I guess I didn't make the list for NASA administrator. Probably that crack about ape suits. But basically, the global warming cult is on the attack against Bill Nye because Bridenstine is not going along with human-caused global warming. He wants to get back into space exploration. And so Scientific American, no less, came out with an editorial just lambasting Bill Nye, saying Bill Nye does not speak for us and he does not speak for science. Of course, he never really did. He doesn't really have a science background. Bill Nye the Science Guy was actually a character name that he played many, many years ago, and it's stuck, and he likes to portray himself as being this big expert. But he isn't really. There goes another big military plane. Now, Verizon and Apple are lobbying against the right to repair. We've been talking about a lot of states are thinking about passing laws that products have to be designed so that their owners can get into them and fix them and just replace a few parts rather than have to buy a whole complete new whatever it is that they're using. And obviously Verizon and Apple, they're in the business of selling you a whole new cell phone every 3 to 5 years, with Apple's top phone now going for $1,000, although it looks like that one may be pulled. It simply has not caught on. And again, a reminder for you astronomy fans, tonight in the early morning hours of tomorrow, depending upon where you are on the globe, there is going to be a very rare eclipse. And it's a blue moon, the second full moon of the month. It is a supermoon, the closest approach to Earth in the lunar orbit, and there's an eclipse as well. And this is something that happened last time more than 150 years ago. So it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for those of you who are, like me, very much into astronomy. Okay, there's the music. It's time for me to get on out of here. Please stay tuned for John Stedmiller. I know he's got a lot of interesting stuff to share with you. I'm going to ask all of you, please take what you learn here, especially the FISA memo, the corruption, the cargo port down in Florida. Just keep pushing it on out there. We can force it into the corporate media. We've done it before. We can do it again. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.